Welcome to Measuring Success Right, the official podcast of the Marriott Student Review, a podcast for students by students, where we connect the leaders of tomorrow with the issues of today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Measuring Success Right. Our guest on the show today is Mike Middleton. Mike is the Dean of External Relations at the Law School and was formerly the director of the Cougar Club here at BYU. Mike, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
To start off, could you give us a brief explanation of what you're doing in your position now at the law school, and then tell us a little bit about what you did while you were the director of the Cougar Club?
You bet. So as Dean of External Relations, and I have to sometimes work with the students to make sure they see the X, not Dean of Eternal Relations. I don't help them find someone to marry. But External Relations, I'm involved with our outreach to the community, particularly our relationships with our nearly 7,000 living alumni of the law school, and then involved with our fundraising and sponsorships that help make everything go. Prior to that, I was involved with similar things for the athletic department, the Cougar Club, a growing group of all the athletic boosters. And so there's some similarities. There are different kinds of events, but events in both positions. And the Cougar Club is that fundraising arm of BYU athletics for those 21 teams that BYU sponsors in the NCAA.
Okay, that's really cool. How did you get involved with both of those positions? They're kind of similar, raising money. How did you get involved with those?
So the Cougar Club is kind of a funny story. The Cougar Club, I've talked about it as the best summer job I ever had. I had a summer where I was doing some things with the Student Alumni Association and working in the old alumni house. And I basically was moving into my master's degree program at BYU in communications. And so they said, hey, we'd love to have you do some stuff with the Cougar Club. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, I'd be interested, but probably just for the summer. And so 20 hours as a student became 25, and 25 became 30. I was working in my master's degree program, but also knowing that I would want a full-time job, and so said, I'd really like to work full-time, and became the assistant director of the Cougar Club. And then when Dale McCann passed away, was acting director, and then the assistant or the executive director of the Cougar Club. And that was, then 26 years later, I applied for this position with the law school because it had so many elements of what I love doing for athletics, but it lets me be a fan now. I'm at the game with my wife, enjoying the game. I'm not there 2 hours early with a hospitality tent and helping the volunteer host get set up, and down with the people firing the cannon, and then helping somebody that left their parking pass at home, and then down doing things on the field at halftime. I'm just watching the game and being a fan. And I was a fan first of all, and I'm back to that. So I enjoy that. I enjoy many of the great friendships I still have with people that are athletic donors or athletic staff and personnel. But the law job has those elements of events, of relationships, of fundraising, maybe without some of the minute detail of having 60,000 people that want football tickets and 20,000 people that want basketball tickets. And one of those guys is going to leave their parking pass home every week, right? We know that, and they're going to call, and I'm glad they call. It was part of the job then. It's not such a big part of the job now.
Great. Well, moral of the story, don't leave your parking pass at home.
Please take your parking pass. I do not have a way to beam one into your car as you're driving down from Boise.
So how long have you been in your position at the law school?
So I started in May of 2020. So literally applied for the job, interviewed for the job, accepted the job, and had never met any of these people in person. So I didn't know if they were giants or they were just 3x2 pictures on my screen, and the fact that they had confidence in me with that same, had never met me in person is really remarkable. But wonderful to work with them, and I guess we're coming up on 2 years now.
Wow. How have you liked it so far?
I've really enjoyed it. It's kind of funny. My wife has this, what would you call it? The text group, I guess, with her siblings. She has 8 siblings, and So she'd announced the news, Mike's taking this new job, and one of her siblings said, "So is his commute shorter now?" Yeah, it's about 47 seconds shorter.
A different building.
I'm on the east side of campus, not the west side of campus. But again, wonderful people. I love being part of things with BYU, 623 student athletes, but I found there's a similar kind of love for the law students, and I'm actually kind of more in the mix. It's a little bit smaller group, the way it's housed. So I was out yesterday between assignments listening to a couple of them sing karaoke in the student talent show. So I've been able to get maybe a little bit closer to the law students as a whole than maybe being a building apart and having those other layers of coaches and trainers and other people who were more serving the student athletes directly. I have some great and wonderful relationships there, but the relationships with the current law students are super valuable to me. For example, we have an LLM program, so we've had students come to the law school for a master's degree in law from over 46 countries now.
Wow.
First person from Sierra Leone
that's
this
really
year,
cool.
and it's just amazing. But there's just a little bit more time maybe to have those individual contacts, to get to know those people one-on-one, and sometimes to help them. So it's something I loved about athletics, but there was a little bit more of a filter or people in between. There was a lot more. I was more outward-facing, where I'm still outward-facing, but there's a lot of chances to just, like I said, break away for a minute and listen to one of our leadership fellows sing New York, New York, and then I'm back to work, which is a little bit harder to do with the student athletes.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you. So what do you enjoy in your career, and how have you found satisfaction? And then maybe what are a couple challenges that you've had to face in your career?
So satisfaction, I think, for me is really, it's internal, it's introspective. And I think that's maybe funny for someone to say that's been so involved with athletics, because usually it's the scoreboard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not how well you played, it's did you beat the other team.
Yeah.
But I think personally the satisfaction comes when you're involved with making a difference. So just as an example, BYU Law is coming up on its 50-year anniversary, which sounds really impressive, but law schools have been around. Yale, Harvard, they graduated their 100th class before BYU Law even got started. We're a relatively wet behind the ears fledgling law school as far as these Ivy-walled earlier institutions go. But coming up on this 50-year institution, 50-year celebration, it's been fun to do some things institutionally. For example, the dean said, let's redo our mission statement. As the law school was founded, a comment was made prophetically that the law school's purpose would unfold in time. And Dean Gordon Smith said, it's time to help with some of that origami. It's time to help with some of that unfolding. Yeah. And so I've loved being a small part of a mission statement that talks about the Savior's 7 roles. There's 7 roles that kind of parallel with law. Healer, lawgiver, judge, advocate, mediator. Those are actually part of our mission statement now. And I take great satisfaction with the idea that that's part of what we're instilling into people. It's not just a union card to go make money at a law firm, but it's this idea that there are some eternal and intrinsic principles that if they're lived, those individuals will have joy and satisfaction in their work, and they'll make a difference in the world. So that's very exciting for me to see those things unfolding, to be a part of them.
That sounds really exciting and like a cool cause to be a part of and to participate in. So being in school where I am, a lot of people are getting ready to start their careers, and we have a lot of teachers and guest speakers who talk a lot about work-life balance. How do you think that people can achieve the appropriate balance in their life?
I think for me, and I'm not great at this, I'm not perfect at this for sure, but I think it's remembering what's eternal. I have a job at the law school. I love that. I've had a job in the athletic department. That's also a great sense of joy and personal pride and satisfaction. I have a calling in our stake presidency. And those are all important things and things I'm going to try to do my very best at, but none of those are eternal. You're eventually going to retire from even your dream job. You're eventually going to be released from any calling in the church. But there's things that are eternal. Like I hope I'm never released as Laura's husband. I'm my 3 kids' dad. Those things are eternal. And so I think sometimes it's learning to prioritize. And that's been one real general rule is what is the eternal commitment? What's the eternal relationship? Honor that first, not exclusively and not at the detriment of losing your job or being really horrible scoutmaster or whatever your calling is. But pay that part of your life first, and then there'll be enough. There'll be enough for the rest of the other parts of your life.
I like that a lot, focusing on things that are eternal and then making everything else work after you focus on the eternal things. That's, I think, important for a lot of people to understand. So you've spent a lot of time with college athletes, and more recently you've said you've spent a lot of time with law students. What have you seen that makes an athlete successful, and what have you seen that makes a law student successful?
There's things that nobody can teach you. They sometimes say the intangibles, the it factor, and I really believe to a certain extent that's true. So you can teach someone to dribble a ball better or to run faster or to throw the football better. You can teach somebody to be a better oralist in the courtroom or to write a better brief, but you really can't control desire. Desire is just internal, and it's either part of you or it's not. I think you can cultivate a stronger desire in yourself. You can create new priorities in different directions and better habits usually. But I think you really can't teach desire. And so that's what I see. I see student athletes that maybe don't have the most talent, but they perform well, usually because of that desire. It's just a burning desire to do well. And I've watched the same thing. I think it's the same principle with law students, because the real kind of the gold standard, the measurement, if you go into most law firms, is billable hours. How much money did you make for us today, and who can we charge for what you just did? And it's interesting to see how successful some of the law students are, where they learn that concept early. That's where they're headed anyway. And so there'll be students that say, well, I was at the law school today for 11 hours or 12 hours, and they feel like they've really accomplished something. But, they played ping pong, they went and got a drink, they watched some TV, they watched something on their computer. And it's the ones that really say, I was I was at the law school today for 10 hours, but 9.5 of those hours I could have billed somebody for as a future attorney. It's really that focus and that efficiency, that ability to say, how do I not only put time in, but what did my time do? What did I do with my time today that was productive?
I like that a lot. I think we've all had those days where we spent 5 hours doing something, when in reality it really could have taken us 30 minutes. So I think that's cool to think about and talk about. What is some advice that you have for some of our listeners, many of whom are at the stage in their life where they are just about to begin their careers?
So I'm going to give tragically controversial advice. I'm going to give 2 principles that are going to seem to contradict each other.
Okay.
And if they can figure it out, then I think it's going to work out for them great. So my first piece of advice would be rigid. There's people who use this phrase, that's a hill I'll die on. Most people don't know what that hill is, right? And so it's this knee-jerk reaction. Something comes up, and then they're up in arms, or they're upset, or they're motivated. I think you can pick your hills early. I think you can say, these are, I guess we talked a little bit about eternal principles. These are the eternal verities of my life, and things that are more important than me actually still breathing. The scriptures have this great quote from the Savior where he says, no man, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Mm-hmm. And it sounds really simple, and in terms of the atonement, it kind of is. He loves us and did that for us, but we all lay our lives down. Not always literally in one catastrophic moment, most of us, but we lay it down a few minutes, a few hours at a time. Are we going to take that time to play catch with our child, or are we going to spend that time listening to our spouse or helping a neighbor or a stranger. We choose to lay our life down, and we choose to have this greater love. So I guess I'd say be rigid and know what those things are. I've been super impressed with some of the alumni of the law school where they've taken these positions, 6- and 7-figure jobs and amazing opportunities, and they've gone in and said to their supervisor, I don't work on Sundays. It's part of my personal moral compass. It's part of my personal religious beliefs. And unless the world's on fire, don't call me on Sunday. But no, I will use the other 6 days of the week to get everything done for the firm. No, there's times that I may be in the office at 12:01 on Monday morning. And if you will trust me, I will show you what the Sabbath means to me and what my job means to me, and then I can do both. And I like that. They're rigid. They've decided early what is right, and it's not for sale. It's not compromisable. We've had this great Old Testament story of Jacob and Esau, and he sells his birthright. Esau does for a mess of pottage, right? Some lentils. And yet there's people in the world who are like saying, well, how big a bowl is it? It's the same principle, whether it's $1 million or a bowl of pottage. And if you have your principles, you're rigid in some ways, then that won't happen. And then the other side of that, the flip side of that, is to be flexible. That once you've decided those hills that you'll die on, that you can be flexible. And one of the things I've seen particularly, not so much in athletics, but particularly in law, I love this quote that this was from the founding 50 years ago of the law school. And this professor said, "You've come to me asking me to draw forth from my desk the chalice of the law, and then you will consume it and know all you need to know to go forth and have successful legal careers." And he says, I'm here to tell you that the law is not contained in a chalice. The law is an ocean. And the best I can do as your instructor is to give you a compass to guide yourself. And I love that. I love that idea that most aspects of our life are not predetermined, that most patriarchal blessings don't contain like addresses and phone numbers of people we're going to marry. Or
if only they did.
They wouldn't work out. It would be bad. It really would. But God's trust in us is shown in letting us make decisions. And so I think sometimes beyond the hills to die on, sometimes people have a very rigid course. And I'm going to take this class, I'm going to get this degree, I'm going to put this many years in at this kind of firm, then I'm going to do this. And they have this wonderful timeline of how their career is going to be, how it's going to be mapped out. And I don't mind that. I think that's good. I think direction is better than indolence. But I think sometimes that people miss the opportunities that were golden opportunities because they weren't in the plan. That they don't necessarily accept that God as their Father and a loving divine being might have a better plan than them. And it may happen sooner or later than they mapped out when they were 19 years old in college or 23 years old after a mission. And so I just think being open to those kind of things. We had a gentleman speak at the law school who had actually been the acting Attorney General of the United States. Wow. And he said, the reason I'm in this job is because I had qualified for a security clearance for another opportunity, and then an opportunity to work with that office came open, and he said, 3 years before I was ready. But he said, rather than waiting to make sure that my timeline worked out, that this job would open again in 3 years, he said, I applied 3 years before I was really ready to do the job. And he says, I'm under no misapprehensions that part of the reason I got the job is they had a narrow window, and the person they hired had to have security clearance, and I did. It wasn't that I was the best person available. I was the best person available that had the security clearance. But I love that he was able to pivot and move his life in a direction that ultimately paid great dividends, not because it came up just exactly as he anticipated that it would, but because he had that faith and confidence that sometimes God's plan is bigger or better or sooner or later or different than yours. And so to be flexible. So I guess that's my advice. Certain things you need to be rigid, certain things you need to be flexible. And the real problems in life come from not knowing which are which or confusing those two and being flexible when you should be rigid and being rigid when you could be flexible.
Wow, I think that's great advice. Thank you so much. I think that's good advice for not only people who are beginning their careers, but for everyone, being rigid and also being flexible with the right things at the same time. So thank you for that. Mike, you've played a lot of roles in your life, a husband, a father, the director of the Cougar Club, and now the dean of the external relations at the law school. How have you measured success in your life?
Something I heard that really impacted me deeply at the time and has impacted me more since. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of religious envy, that you can be a devout believer in your own religious belief system and yet see things in other religions that you like and admire.
Okay.
So that's the concept in a nutshell. So one of the times in my life I felt just a little bit of that religious envy is that we had a visiting rabbi on campus at BYU. And he made a statement. I can't tell you what he said for the other 48 minutes. But he made a statement. He said that in my religious understanding, sin is anything that you can't do with your full heart. And I love that. I love that idea that sin is not always about doing something wrong, like there's a law and you've broken it. Obviously, at the law school, we believe that as a member of the church. I believe that there are eternal laws, there are man-made laws, and that is wrong. That is sin. That is crime. But that there's a higher standard, that it's who are you and what do you believe and what is the best you know, and that is your requirement. That is your standard, not the lower standard of maybe what other human beings might ask of you, or even, what does the gospel say? And the gospel is so expansive that I think sometimes it's hard to say, well, I overdid it. I had too much charity again today. You don't do that. But I love that idea that sin is anything that you can't do with your full heart. So to go through life where that's now become part of my religious belief, what can I do with my full heart? And it can be the same act, right? It can be listening to somebody. Am I really listening to them, or am I just kind of going through the motions? Am I really giving my employer like the full measure of my mental and other abilities, or am I just punching in, just getting my time in? Oh, it's 5:00. It's time to go home. And so I think that's been really a helpful way to measure success. Are the things I'm doing with my family, with my job, with my hobbies, am I really doing this with my full heart? And if not, maybe it's not sin, but I'm falling short. And not that you get wrapped up in blaming yourself and hating yourself, but I find sometimes that we're our own worst enemy. That sometimes we're trying so hard not to fail that we rob ourselves of success. And so I think that full heart measurement is just a really good measure to put to all aspects of my life. And if I feel like I'm doing my very best, does it matter that somebody ran the 5K faster? It doesn't matter at all. It was never between me and that other person. It's between me and God, me and myself. Does it matter that maybe we went to a donor for a big ask, a big gift, and they said no, or they said, not right now. If I really did it with my full heart, that's still success. And so I know there need to be external measures. How long did that 5K take, or how much money did we bring in? But the measurement I can control is how my heart is engaged. And if I'm doing it with my full heart, then that's always success.
Wow, I love that. Thank you for that great answer, Mike. And thank you for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
And thank you to all who listened to today's episode. If you would like to receive our Saturday newsletter, we invite you to go subscribe to it on our website, marriottstudentreview.org.
Make sure you subscribe to our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. Be a friend and tell a friend about measuring success right.
This podcast is a project of the Marriott Student Review at Brigham Young University. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Marriott Student Review, or online at marriottstudentreview.org.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect official policy or position of Brigham Young University or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.